The 50% capital gains discount is dead. That's law now, not a rumour. And a wave of videos is already telling Australian investors to think hard about selling before the 30th of June 2027, while gains are still taxed at half rate. So, I read the Act. And here's what the panic is missing. For assets you already own, the deadline isn't real. The transition rules protect your existing gains automatically. The panic move, selling and buying back in, would leave our example investor about $3,000 worse off, for literally zero tax benefit, with a tax office wash sale problem on top. Today, what actually passed, why the deadline is a myth, the one bit of genuine homework the new law gives you. And what it really changes, because that part is big. Before the numbers, the important bit. This is general information only, not financial advice, not tax advice, and not a prediction of what the tax office will clarify next. I'm not licensed. None of this considers your personal situation. And selling or holding real assets has real costs and real tax consequences. This model simplifies. If you're genuinely weighing a decision like this one, take your own numbers to a licensed financial advisor or a registered tax agent before you act. This video is the homework you bring to that conversation, not a substitute for it. First, the facts. Because most of what's circulating was recorded when this was a proposal, and it changed on the way through the Senate. 33 amendments worth. From the 1st of July 2027, the 50% discount ends for individuals and trusts, including partners in partnerships. In its place, two mechanisms. One, your cost base gets indexed to inflation, so the part of any future gain that's just CPI is no longer taxed at all, provided you've held the asset at least 12 months. Two, a 30% minimum rate on what's left. And that word minimum matters. It's a floor, not the rate. If your marginal rate is above 30, like our investor today, you pay your marginal rate on the real gain. The floor exists to top up people taxed below 30, and there's even a carve-out. Age pension and income support recipients aren't hit by it. Scope quickly. Shares and ETFs are fully caught. This is not just a property story. Companies and super funds are untouched. Super keeps its own 1/3 discount. Even pre-1985 assets get a gentle landing, valued at July 2027, with only future gains taxed, and negative gearing changed in the same act, quarantined for newly purchased established homes. Existing owners grandfathered until they sell. That one's getting its own video. Now let's give the panic a person. Meet Dave, 38, 150 grand income, so 39% marginal with Medicare. 6 years ago, he put 60,000 into ASX ETFs, outside super. Today, it's worth 100,000. 40 grand of unrealised gain. The exact person every Sell Before July video is aimed at. The pitch he's hearing: your discount dies in June 2027, use it or lose it. Sounds urgent. Is it true? No. And it's not a loophole or a grey area. It's the transition rule, written into the Act. Every asset you hold on the 1st of July 2027 is treated as split at that date. The gain you've already made, for Dave, that 40 grand, and any growth up to July 2027, keeps the 50% discount, and you pay that tax only when you actually sell, whenever that is. 2040, if he likes. Only the growth after July 2027 runs through the new system, with the assets July 2027 value as its cost base. Don't take my word for it. Treasury's own fact sheet says it in one sentence. There is no incentive to buy or sell assets before this date. The deadline that's driving all the urgency does not exist for assets you already own. There is one genuine to-do in there, though. That split needs a value at the 1st of July 2027. For listed shares and ETFs, it's just the quoted price, automatic. For other assets, there's a choice between a valuation and a formula the tax office is building tools for. So the real June 2027 homework is paperwork. Knowing your numbers on that date, not panic. But let's be fair to the panic and cost the maneuver properly, because it can't hurt to lock it in, right? Wrong. If Dave sells in June 2027 and buys straight back in, he pays exactly the same discounted tax he'd have paid anyway. $7,800, just years earlier, so that money stops compounding for him. Run it forward 10 years and he lands $3,300 behind the bloke who did nothing. Add brokerage and the spread, and it's closer to $4,500. And on top of the cost, a sell and instant rebuy, done purely for a tax outcome, is classic wash sale territory. The tax office's general anti-avoidance rules can unwind exactly this kind of round trip, with penalties. So the scoreboard on the panic move. No tax saved, thousands lost to early payment and frictions, plus regulator risk. It's not just pointless, it's worse than pointless. Now, the objection you should be making. Hang on, 30% minimum, 39 for Dave, when the old system taxed him at 19.5. How is that not worse for everyone? Because the rate went up, but the base went down, and you have to multiply them. Old law, 19.5% of the whole nominal gain, inflation included. New law, 39% of the real gain only, after inflation is deleted. Run Dave's next 10 years at 4% growth. The nominal gain is about $49,500, but $31,000 of that is just inflation. Old law taxes the lot, $9,600. New law taxes the $18,000 that's real, $7,100. Higher rate, smaller base, lower bill. So whether you win or lose under this law comes down to one question. How much of your gain is inflation, and how much is real? And that answers the question most of you should actually be asking. Because I own index funds, the market grows faster than inflation, so I must be hit. Right? Not necessarily. Here's the subtlety. Capital gains tax never sees your dividends. They're taxed every year as income, and this act doesn't touch that. CGT only sees price growth, and Australian index funds are dividend machines. The ASX 200's 8-ish% total return arrives as roughly 4% dividends and only 4% price growth. 4% price, 3-ish inflation. Most of that gain was never real. On Dave's numbers, a VAS-style holder actually ends up about $2,500 better, off over 10 years than under the old discount. Now flip to where the return arrives as price. An international index fund pays maybe 2% in dividends, call it 7.5% price growth, on its 20-year record, unhedged, so currency swings cut both ways decade to decade. Same maths, opposite verdict, about $8,500 worse over 10 years. A low dividend growth stock compounding at 10%, $19,000 worse over a decade. And because this compounds, roughly $84,000 over 20 years. Property price growth, about 5.5%, nationally over 30 years, sits in between, and that one's next week's video. One footnote for ETF holders before anyone corrects me in the comments. Fund distributions can also include capital gains the fund itself realized. Those are taxed in the year you receive them, exactly as they always were. The split that matters here is the growth still sitting in the unit price. So the honest headline isn't everyone pays more, and it isn't slow assets win, fast assets lose. It's this. The new law is kind to returns that arrive as income, and expensive for returns that arrive as price. Which means, whether Canberra intended it or not, it just tilted the personal tax system towards Australian dividend payers and away from international growth compounders. That's the change worth understanding, not because of any deadline, but every year from 2027 onwards. The next dollar call then. The math says the June 2027 deadline earns none of your next dollars. The Act already protects the gains you have, and paying the tax office early on a smaller base is a donation, not a strategy. Where the maths does point, know your July 2027 values. That's real homework with a real date. And from 2027, the interesting question stops being, when do I sell? And becomes, where should price growth assets live? Because the gap between personal holdings, super's untouched discount, and income versus price returns just got wider. Every assumption in this video is on screen. When the tax office's guidance and valuation tools land, rerun the numbers on your own holding. That's the whole method. That's the maths. If a channel that reads the legislation before filming the thumbnail sounds useful, subscribing is the one-click way to keep it in your feed. One Australian money decision at a time. Run properly through the numbers. See you in the next one.